They told me not to be in the photo, not cruelly, not directly. It came wrapped in soft voices and upward glances, like they were embarrassed to ask aloud. "We're doing just the grandkids and the kids this year," my daughter-in-law said, her hands fluttering around the hem of her coordinated blouse. "You understand, right? We're going for a younger vibe this time." A younger vibe. I stood there with my hands still damp from peeling carrots, the apron string biting softly into my back. My kitchen, my home had been filled with laughter and the scent of rosemary all morning. I'd baked the rolls from scratch. The roast was resting. But suddenly, none of that seemed to matter. I nodded. I always nodded. The planning had started 2 weeks ago in the family group chat images of burnt orange dresses, khaki pants, sunset filters, and questions about whether bare feet would look more authentic on the lawn. I'd sent a thumbs-up emoji. No one replied. That didn't stop me from buying a blouse. Cream-colored, with lace trim at the cuffs, and a tag that said, "Classic Elegance." I'd picked it up from a boutique that smelled faintly of cedar and perfume. The saleswoman had smiled and said, "You'll look lovely in this." I believed her. When they arrived at my house, arms full of folding chairs and phone tripods, they hugged me distractedly, complimented the pie, mentioned how cozy everything looked, and then hurried past with camera bags and lint rollers in hand. "Photo shoots in an hour," my son said. "You probably want to rest, right, Mom?" I didn't answer, just wiped my hands and followed them quietly to the screen door. Through the mesh, I watched the photographer set up. A tall man in suspenders with a charming stubble, adjusting his lens as if he were about to capture royalty. Everyone gathered in matching earth tones. The little ones were told where to stand, how to hold hands, how to look candid, but not too messy. My granddaughter, sweet Emma, caught sight of me and waved. I lifted my fingers in return, but her mother leaned down and whispered something. Emma's hand dropped. The photographer glanced my way and hesitated. Then the camera clicked. Once, twice, dozens of times. I stood there behind the door, a silhouette. "She'll slow us down." That's what I'd overheard once on a cruise trip conversation. "She doesn't fit the aesthetic." Another time, during a spring picnic I wasn't invited to, the words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They were carefully chosen, like matching throw pillows, comfortable for everyone but me. Later, when they left for the park to chase golden hour, I went to my bedroom. I opened the top drawer of my old bureau. It stuck slightly, as it always had, until I lifted the left corner. Inside, wrapped in a shawl, the color of wet leaves, was my Polaroid. Next to it sat the tripod my husband and I used to use for Christmas cards back when we still sent them. The last photo inside the camera was of him in our garden, holding a tomato like a prize. I changed into the blouse, added my favorite shawl, the one with the fringe worn thin from years of porch breezes. I brushed my hair, pinned it back, and then I stepped outside. The sun was lower now, spilling its light across the porch like spilled honey. I stood under the old oak tree, our tree, the one we planted the year my youngest left for college. I clicked the timer, walked to the banister. One hand on my hip, the other resting gently like I'd done this every day. I smiled, not the kind people wear for photographers, but the kind that carries the weight of every missed invitation, every quiet dinner, every unopened card. The camera clicked. A soft sound, almost apologetic. I let the moment settle, then took another, and another. Inside, I printed one of them. Just one. My face soft, lined with history. No retouching, no hashtags. Just me. I found an old frame in the hall closet. Wiped it clean. Slipped the photo inside. And I placed it on the living room wall. Right where the old family portrait used to hang. When they came back, their arms full of picnic blankets and juice boxes, no one noticed. They were tired, giddy, talking about how perfect the light had been, how professional the photographer was, how the final shot was definitely going over the mantel. They didn't notice mine. They left Sunday evening, kisses on the cheek, leftovers packed in foil. The house grew quiet again. I made a cup of tea, wiped a fingerprint from the glass of the frame, and I looked at the woman in the photo, still, present, unbothered by exclusion. I remembered the first photo I took of my daughter. A crooked smile with 2 missing teeth. Film camera. I'd framed it myself and hung it near the kitchen sink where the sun hit just right. Over the years, I took hundreds more birthdays, graduations, weddings. But I was rarely in them. I was always behind the lens, holding the baby, smoothing the collar, straightening the boutonniere, invisible in the final frame. But not this time. This time I centered myself. And later, weeks later, a package would arrive. A large canvas print of that family photo. Everyone glossy and smiling. Everyone but me. My name wasn't on the tag. No note inside. I hung it anyway. Right beside mine. 2 photos. Side by side. One curated, one lived. And if anyone asks, I'll simply say, they took a picture of a family. I captured a woman who made it. The first real moment it settled in me, not as a passing bruise but as something deeper, came 3 days before the photo. It was a Thursday, late afternoon. The house smelled like yeast rolls and lemon furniture polish. I'd been moving slowly, dusting frames and wiping down window panes in preparation for the family's arrival. Not out of obligation, out of habit, out of something quieter than pride care. The living room was dim, golden from the slant of late-day sun. I had just straightened the old photo of our wedding day, Paul in his navy suit, me in borrowed lace, when I heard the front door creak open. "Mom," my son called out. His voice had that distracted pitch I recognized from years ago, back when he was still small and rushing to say what he needed before running off again. "In here," I called, tugging my sleeves down and brushing invisible dust from the hem of my sweater. He walked in first, already mid-sentence with his wife, Jenna, trailing behind, 2 reusable shopping bags in her hands and a phone wedged between her shoulder and ear. They looked like an ad for something effortless, efficient, slightly harried in a way that made them feel important. "Oh, good," he said when he saw me. "We might store some stuff in the guest room if that's okay, just for the shoot. Extra clothes and bags and things." "Of course," I said, already reaching for the bags. Jenna didn't hand them to me. "Mom," she said gently, not unkindly, "you don't have to lift anything. Really, you should sit. Rest a bit. The grandkids will be running around soon, and we've got that photographer coming Saturday. It's going to be full on." I smiled. It felt like the right thing to do, even if my hands stayed awkwardly midair. "I'm fine. Been looking forward to the weekend." She gave that tight-lipped smile she always does when she's trying to be polite. Then turned her attention back to her call. My son nodded absently. "Oh, by the way, Emma wants to do a hair and outfit test tonight. She and Livy want matching braids or something. Jenna's on it. We're thinking soft neutrals for everyone. Maybe blues for the boys. We want it to look cohesive this time. Cohesive. I thought of the blouse folded neatly on my dresser, cream-colored with lace cuffs, chosen to match anything and nothing. Neutral. Elegant. Quiet. Should I lay out something too? I asked. The question escaped without my full permission. My voice didn't crack, but it caught a little like it had tripped on something. He paused, just a second too long. Then, oh well, we're kind of going for a younger look this time. Just the kids and grandkids. Jenna had a vision for it. A vision. I see, I said. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did and chose not to. That's the trouble with these moments. They're easy to excuse, easy to edit into something less painful. Later, I would wonder if it really happened the way I remember. The rest of the evening moved fast. Noise, laughter, little feet scampering across hardwood floors. I served them tea while they unpacked. Set out cookies, the kind Emma used to love. No one touched them. They were too busy sorting outfits and arguing over which shoes matched best with sand. At one point, I walked into the hall and saw Jenna holding swatches up to the wall. Do you think this clashes with the paint? She asked no one in particular. I mean, it's just a background, but still. These frames, she gestured toward the gallery wall, are a bit much. Might be distracting. The gallery wall, my wall, filled with decades of Lies black and white photos, crayon drawings, certificates from spelling bees, and band recitals. I dusted that wall every Sunday, lined up the frames so straight they looked measured. But to her, it was clutter. Noise. She caught my eye and quickly added, not that it's not lovely, it's just, we want the focus to be the kids. The kids. I nodded. Again. That night, after they'd gone to their rooms, and the dishwasher hummed its final cycle, I stood in the hallway, in front of the wall. I looked at each photo. My daughter's toothless grin at age 7. Paul in his uniform. A blurry shot of our first dog, Lucky, mid-leap. All of it told a story. Mine. Ours. But stories like mine don't match curated aesthetics. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed and listened to the creaks of the house, the muffled voices from down the hall, the occasional laughter. None of it unkind. None of it meant to hurt. That's what made it worse. They weren't trying to exclude me. They were just moving on carefully, smoothly, without pausing to notice who wasn't keeping pace. In the morning, I woke early, as always. The house was quiet. I made coffee, set out plates, folded napkins. When Emma came downstairs, bleary-eyed in her unicorn pajamas, she blinked at me and said, "Grandma, are you in the picture too?" Before I could answer, her mother's voice called from upstairs. "Emma, don't bother Grandma. She's tired. Come pick your shoes." I didn't correct her. I just handed Emma a muffin and watched her disappear up the stairs. I looked at my hands veined, freckled, worn from decades of baking, buttoning, holding. I had never been tired for them, but maybe that's what I had become. The tired one. The one they let rest while they posed. I rinsed my mug, dried it slowly, and opened the drawer where we kept the camera. Not for them, for me. It starts with the little things. That's how these changes come. Not in thunderclaps, but in the soft fading of once firm lines. Take breakfast, for instance. It used to be a ritual. I'd rise before the sun, start the coffee perking, slice fruit just so pears if it was winter, peaches when they were in season. I'd toast the bread, set the table, fold the napkins with care. When the kids were small, it was the only quiet time we had. We'd eat in a gentle hush, just me and Paul, watching the birds thrum at the feeder before the day took off. This time, though, I heard them before I saw them. Murmurs in the kitchen, laughter against clinking mugs. I shuffled in, still tying the belt of my robe, and paused in the doorway. Jenna had brought her own cold brew, some glass bottle from a health store downtown. My son stood over the stove, whisking eggs with oat milk, something about cholesterol and gut health. The toaster popped behind him. Multigrain, unsalted butter. "Morning," I said, smiling. Jenna looked up, startled, then returned to her conversation with Livy, who was arguing about whether flaxseed muffins tasted weird. My son gave me a quick nod. "Hey, Mom, there's fruit in the fridge if you're hungry." I looked at the counter, 3 plates already made, no fourth. I didn't say anything. Just opened the fridge, took out a yogurt that wasn't mine, coconut and chia, flavors I'd never learned to like, and found a spoon from the drawer. I ate, standing up. They didn't notice. Later, I found the small skillet I always used tucked in the dishwasher. Unwashed. Forgotten. In the evenings, I still light the lamp near the bookshelf. Still fold the throws over the couch. I even dust the corners no one ever sees, the baseboards behind the end table, the lip of the windowsill where the lace curtain gathers. But nobody mentions it. Nobody notices the way the living room stays neat, or how the guest towels are always warm from the dryer. They come in, drop bags, kick off shoes, talk over dinner plans, use my kitchen like a rental. I overheard Jenna telling Emma, "Don't play in the formal room, honey. It's full of grandmas." Stuff, as if the piano was just clutter, as if the collection of pressed flowers in the frame by the lamp Paul's anniversary gift to me in 1989 was some generic knick-knack from a bargain bin. They weren't cruel about it. That's the part that gets you. They were casual. Casual is harder to fight. It slips past your defenses, makes you wonder if maybe you're being too sensitive. Maybe the world just moves faster now, and you're the one who stopped keeping up. Dinner was the same. I always make a roast the first night. It's tradition. A slow roast with rosemary, garlic, carrots, always carrots, for the color, and potatoes soft enough to press with a fork. But this year, Jenna asked if they could just do takeout, said the kids don't really eat roast anymore. Too heavy. Said she'd already ordered grain bowls from some fusion place in town. "Maybe tomorrow, Mom?" my son added. "We'll do your roast tomorrow." Tomorrow. Always tomorrow. They came back with brown bags, the smell of sesame and cilantro filling the kitchen. I sat at the table with my napkin in my lap, the roast resting in the oven on low, untouched. No one said thank you. No one asked how long it had taken. They opened cans of sparkling water, passed out plastic forks, and laughed about how Livy's bowl had too much tofu. I excused myself early. No one stopped me. Evenings used to be mine. That soft hour after dinner, when the house hummed low and everyone drifted into their own corners. That's when I'd tidy up, turn on the radio, and fold towels in half light. Sometimes Paul would join me. Sometimes he'd sit nearby and hum along to the songs. Now the evenings belonged to screens. Laptops glowed from every corner, earbuds plugged into ears. The TV babbled softly, playing something I couldn't follow, too fast, too sarcastic. They sat together but didn't speak. I brought out the basket of yarn and started to knit. Not because I needed another shawl, because it was something to do with my hands, something that made me feel solid. Emma walked by once and glanced down. "What are you making, Grandma?" "Just a little throw blanket," I said, holding up a square. "Oh," she said, "that's nice." Then she was gone, swallowed back into the digital light. No one asked to learn. No one reached for the yarn. They used to come to me for stories. Even as teenagers, they'd sit at my feet or perch on the armrest while I told them about the time Paul and I got caught in a thunderstorm on the Blue Ridge Parkway, or how I once tried to make French toast with mayonnaise when I was 12 and too proud to admit I didn't know what I was doing. Now, the stories sit inside me like books no one wants to borrow. One night, I offered to read to Emma before bed. She smiled politely, glanced at her tablet, and said, "It's okay, Grandma. I already have my audiobook on." I nodded. Of course she did. Even the cat started following Jenna around. Not that I blame her. Jenna wears a floral lotion that smells like peaches and speaks in that soft, upward tone that animals seem to like. Still, it stung. I'd raised that cat from a kitten, nursed her through a bout of pneumonia, but she curled on Jenna's lap now, kneaded her sweaters, purred with contentment. I tried not to mind. I told myself not to care. But the days were piling up like leaves, one indistinguishable from the next. And I was starting to forget the last time someone looked at me and saw a person, not a prop, not an extra in their scene. One morning, I came downstairs to find my teacup missing from its usual spot on the shelf, replaced by a row of sleek, mismatched mugs, modern and minimal. Mine was tucked in a box under the sink. Not broken, not discarded, just relocated. That's how it happens. They don't mean to erase you. They just make space for other things. And when the space runs out, you get stored. Before the cameras got fancy. Before we filtered our faces and framed our families like showroom displays. There was a summer in 1994. It was a hot one. The kind of southern heat that curled paint and slowed time. The kids were still young then, my son in high school, my daughter trying on independence like a loose sweater. Paul was alive, tan from the garden, always smelling faintly of earth and mint from the sun tea he brewed out back. That July, we hosted the family reunion in our backyard. The invitation had been my idea simple, typed out on cream cardstock with a flower border, the kind you'd find in a church stationery drawer. "Come hungry," it said, "and stay long." And they did. Cousins from 3 states. My brother's twins, wild and sunburned. Paul's niece, with her loud laugh and gentle hands. Everyone came. They brought pasta salad and folding chairs, stories and mosquito spray. Someone brought a boombox. Someone else a quilt embroidered with every family surname. I remember the table we set up under the oak tree. Paul had built it himself the year before. Thick pine beams sanded smooth and stained with care. We laid out potato salad, deviled eggs, ham with pineapple rings, sweet corn roasted in foil. I baked 3 pies, peach, apple, and pecan, and they were gone before the ice melted in the lemonade. But what I remember most is the photo. Not the kind we posed for, not the one we sent in Christmas cards. No, this one came mid-laughter. Unplanned, it was my daughter who took it. I'd just come outside with a tray of sweet tea. My hair was pinned back. I wore a green sundress Paul liked, the one he said made me look like spring. Someone had called my name. I turned, laughing, the tray still balanced in my hands. And there, click, the shutter caught me. Not ready, not perfect, just there. Later, when we developed the film, I saw it. Me in mid-turn, mouth open in a smile, sun on my cheek, tea glinting in the glasses. The kids were in the background, chasing fireflies in a jar. Paul stood beside me, half out of frame, grinning like he'd just told a joke he was proud of. That photo hung in the hallway for 20 years. And every time I passed it, I saw a woman fully inside her own life. That was the summer I built the herb garden, painted the fence myself, sewed new curtains for the kitchen, and taught Emma how to braid bread. I was younger, yes, but it wasn't just youth that made me feel present. It was the way my family turned toward me, asked for things, leaned in, took my advice, even when they didn't follow it. They listened. They saw me. I remember Paul calling across the yard that evening, holding up a paper plate stacked with pie crust crumbs, and saying, "Mary, you've outdone yourself. Again." Everyone laughed. It wasn't a compliment out of politeness. It was real, warm, weighty. When the sun sank low and the lightning bugs blinked along the fence line, we all sat under string lights Paul had hung from the gutters. I remember the music playing low from the boom box, Patsy Cline, I think, and the way Livy curled into my lap, sticky from watermelon and sleep. I held her as her chest rose and fell, her breath still warm with childhood. "I want to live here forever," she mumbled before dozing off, and I believed she meant it, because back then, this house wasn't just where I lived. It was where we all belonged. The photo faded some over time. The colors dulled, the edges curled, but I never replaced it. It was too honest to throw away. When Emma turned 16, I gave her a copy. She smiled, said, "Grandma, your hair was so brown," and I laughed. "It was the sun," I said, "and a box of dye I didn't tell your grandfather about." Back then, even the jokes found a place to land. Now, when I pass that same hallway, the frame is still there, but it leans slightly, and the glass has a crack in the bottom left corner. No one notices. The newer photos, sharper, brighter, more curated, have begun to crowd it out. But I still look at it. Sometimes I run my finger along the glass, trace the lines of that long-ago day. Not because I want to go back. I don't. I just want to remember what it felt like to matter in a room before I had to earn it. To bring out a tray and know someone would notice the effort. To laugh and be caught in the middle of it. Not edited, not staged, just loved. In full. I think of that day often now, especially when I walk past the mirror in the hall and barely recognize the woman staring back. Her hair is gray, her eyes a little smaller, tucked behind years of squinting and smiling. She wears soft sweaters, not spring dresses. Her trays are lighter now. Her hands shake sometimes when pouring tea. But she's still there, still whole, still worthy of being seen. That's why I kept the old tripod, why I dusted off the Polaroid and stood beneath the same tree. Not to recreate something, not to compete with their curated moments, but to remind myself, to remind them, if they ever care to look again, that I once lit up a frame. And I still can. It was Saturday morning, and for a moment I let myself believe. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't hum with loneliness, but holds its breath with anticipation. Light spilled through the kitchen window, soft and golden, catching the edge of the old fruit bowl. I had just finished wiping down the table, smoothing the runner like I always did when company came over, even if the company was already sleeping down the hall. And then I saw it, an empty mug in the sink. One of mine, not Jenna's glass tumblers or the kids' novelty cups. My cream ceramic mug, the one with the delicate blue line around the rim, chipped just slightly at the handle. Someone had used it. That detail stopped me, not because of what it meant exactly, but because of what I thought it could mean. A gesture, a reach, however small. I rinsed it slowly, cradling the handle like it was an artifact. For a brief, silly second, I imagined Jenna coming downstairs later, glancing at the mug and saying, "I used yours. Hope that's okay. It just felt right this morning." And maybe she'd sit and we'd talk over coffee. Maybe she'd say they'd been thinking about adding a few family photos to their hallway at home, that they'd bring me a copy, that they'd noticed how warm the lighting was in the living room last night, and maybe I'd be willing to be in just 1 or 2 shots today. Nothing fancy, just to have. A maybe, a flicker, a breath of possibility. Later that morning, I made myself a second cup of tea. I wore the cream blouse again, pressed and laid out on the bed from the night before. I added my mother's brooch to the collar, not because anyone would notice, just because it reminded me I came from a line of women who never waited to be seen to show up whole. Down the hall, the house started to stir feet, patting on carpet, the soft thud of doors opening, the murmurs of plans being made. I caught pieces of it. Something about shoes and cardigans, the photographer arriving early. Then came the voice I know best. "Is Grandma coming?" Emma asked. I stepped closer to the doorway, still out of view. "No, honey," Jenna replied gently. "She's staying inside. It's better for the theme." Theme, not health, not fatigue, not preference, aesthetic. I stepped back. The tea had cooled. I poured it out without tasting it. Around noon, they gathered in the front yard. I watched from the kitchen window this time. Not the screen door, not the shadows. I didn't want to be a silhouette again. They moved like clockwork, practiced and pleasant. The girls in warm neutrals, the boys with tucked shirts and gelled hair. They laughed easily, turned their heads on cue. The photographer adjusted their positions like flower stems in a vase. And then, something strange. A pause. He gestured toward the porch. I couldn't hear him, but his hand motioned back toward the house, toward me. I stood still. Jenna stepped forward, smiling tightly. She shook her head. A brief exchange, a shrug. Then the camera clicked again. I turned away before the next flash. That afternoon, they came in flushed and giddy, chatting about proofs and previews. They tossed their shoes by the door, rifled through the fridge for snacks. No one mentioned the porch, or me, or whether I'd been watching. I didn't ask. Instead, I found the mug again, washed, dried, placed neatly upside down in the wrong cabinet. The blue-rimmed one, and just like that, I understood. It hadn't been a gesture. It had been convenience. They used it because it was there, because I had left it clean and ready, because someone needed something, and it served its purpose. No more, no less. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the shawl folded over the chair. I ran my fingers along the fringe. For a long time, I didn't move. The house hummed around me, TV voices, phone buzzes, water running down pipes. But inside my room, it was still. Not quiet. Still. the kind of still that comes after hope has visited and quietly excused itself. No storm, no speech, just the gentle closing of a door. I didn't sleep that night, not from pain, not exactly, not even sorrow in the way most would think of it. It was quieter than that, a kind of bone-deep tired that seeps in without warning, like water into a cellar steady, silent, and suddenly there's no dry ground left. I lay in bed, the ceiling above me pale with moonlight, and listened to the familiar creaks of my old house. I used to take comfort in those sounds. They meant the place was still alive, still settling. But tonight, they felt like reminders. Settled, worn, forgotten. At some point, I sat up. My hands rested in my lap, palms open like I was waiting to receive something. I didn't even know what. An apology? A whisper of thanks? Just proof that someone noticed I'd stayed awake long after the lights had gone out. None came. The hallway light spilled faintly under my door. A shadow passed, once probably Jenna, on her way to the bathroom. I heard her slippers shuffle, the sink run, then silence again. No knock, no pause, no, "Are you still up, Mary?" They forget I don't sleep much, that I rise before the sun, not because I have to anymore, but because it's the only time the world feels like it's mine. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. That may not sound like much, but for me, it was everything. I've made coffee every morning since I was 17 years old. Through morning sickness, hangovers, heartbreaks, and hospital calls. I brewed it for Paul even the week he started forgetting how he liked it. I made it on Christmas mornings and on the day I found out my brother had passed. It was more than a beverage. It was a ritual, an opening of the day. But that morning, I just stood at the counter, looking at the empty pot. My fingers hovered over the switch, then fell away. Why brew warmth for a day that had none to offer? I wandered the kitchen, not touching much. The fruit had gone soft, the bread stale. The air smelled faintly of ginger and something else left over takeout, maybe. The smell of a meal no one offered to share. I opened the fridge, a casserole dish with a note on top. "Don't forget this is for the kids' lunch." Jenna's handwriting, looping and precise. I closed it gently. When did I become the fridge watcher? The house minder? The thing that lives here between visits, holding space. I pressed my palm flat on the table, felt its solidness beneath me. This table had hosted birthdays, game nights, 100 bowls of soup for fevers and heartbreaks. It had been loud once, messy, beautifully full. Now it held silence and fingerprints no one bothered to wipe. I went to the living room and stood by the fireplace, looked at the wall where the family portraits hung. So many faces, but not mine. I'd taken half of those photos. The rest I'd framed. Bought the hooks, measured the distance between nails, straightened them after every holiday gathering. I used to joke that I was the family's memory keeper. Turns out, I was only holding everyone else's. No one ever turned the camera toward me, and when they did, it was always an afterthought. A blurry shot, a half smile, a moment not worth printing. It never felt like a slight, not at first, but over time, it added up. You don't realize you're invisible until you stop casting shadows. I sat down in Paul's old armchair, the one that still creaked in the same spot. I pulled the shawl tighter around my shoulders and folded my arms, the way I used to when I was cold, but didn't want to admit it. I wasn't cold, just hollow. There's a peculiar ache that comes from being useful, but not loved. Needed, but not wanted. You become the backdrop, the fixture, expected, but never considered. I used to hear Jenna say to the kids, "Grandma's here, she'll help." And I did. I helped. I cooked. I babysat. I lent money, time, patience. I gave quietly the way I'd been taught. Love wasn't something you shouted about. It was what you did in the background while others got the credit. But somewhere along the way, the giving turned into expectation, and then into assumption, and now obligation. They don't see me anymore. Not really. Not as the woman who held her family through funerals and flu seasons. Not the one who once danced barefoot with Paul in this very room to an old Sinatra record. They see the body that keeps the house open, the hands that still remember how to turn on the water heater and where the good towels are kept. But they don't see me, the me who still dreams in color, who still remembers the thrill of her first kiss, who still knows how to change a tire, who once almost left for Paris, but stayed to raise a boy who now forgets she liked her coffee with cream, not milk. I don't cry much. Not because I'm strong, not really, but because over time, the tears learned to stay where they were. Deep, rooted. Still, this wasn't the kind of sadness you sob through. It was the kind that lived in your joints, that settled in your throat like dust, that made every small kindness feel like a feast, and every small slight feel like a landslide. In that chair, with the house muffled around me, I let it sink in. They don't mean harm, but that's the thing. Neglect never thinks it's cruel. It just forgets to check. It happened in the hallway, not with fanfare, not even with much thought. Just a moment, a pause, a breath long enough to feel something real stir beneath the stillness. I was carrying a load of towels. Jenna liked the soft ones for the kids' bath, and the dryer had finished half an hour earlier. I was folding them, out of habit more than anything, when I passed the wall outside the guest room. It was their photo wall, newly added this year. A dozen frames in soft gold and weathered wood, artfully arranged like something from a magazine. The gallery look, Jenna had said. Cohesive. I stopped, towels resting against my hip, and studied it. There were beach shots, cabin shots, staged candids from their backyard. Emma with a sparkler, Livy on her bike, my son holding a wine glass, and grinning in that self-assured way he inherited from his father. Jenna in a sundress, barefoot on a deck, a perfect sequence of curated joy. I searched the wall. Not desperately, just enough. I wasn't there, not even in the background, not even in a corner, blurry and unposed. And for once, I didn't feel sad. Not in the way I had before. I felt clear, like fog lifting from a windshield, just enough to see the road again. I finished folding the towels, placed them in the linen cupboard, and walked to my bedroom. Slowly, each step measured, as if I were crossing into something else. In the back of the closet, tucked behind a quilt and a box of old wrapping paper, was the tripod. Paul's tripod. He bought it after our 25th anniversary, when he got the idea that we should take our own holiday portraits. "We'll make a tradition of it," he'd said. "Just us and the self-timer." We did it 3 years in a row. The first in front of the house, with a wreath between us. The second by the garden in spring. The third in the snow, wrapped in scarves and laughing so hard the camera shook. That tripod hadn't moved in over a decade. Still intact, a little stiff at the hinges, but solid. I pulled it out, set it on the bed, Then I reached into the drawer beneath the cedar chest. The Polaroid. Older now, the film harder to find, but she still worked. The last photo she took was still tucked inside the casing. I pulled it free. Paul, kneeling in the tomato patch, holding up a perfectly round heirloom with a look of triumph. He'd written King of July on the white space with a black marker. I traced the letters with my thumb. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, both hands resting on the camera, and breathed. Something inside me, long quiet, long pushed to the side, uncurled just slightly. Not rage, not bitterness, something steadier. A sense that I had given too much space, that I had waited too long at the edges, that I had allowed the version of me they preferred, the convenient one, the silent one, to take root in their minds as the only version that existed. But I remembered the rest. I remembered the me who planted gardens, who painted walls, who sewed her own dress for her daughter's homecoming dance. The me who held Paul as he died and never once turned her face away. The me who danced alone in the kitchen after she passed her driving test at 47. I remembered the woman I had been when no one else was looking. And suddenly, I didn't want to be invisible in my own home anymore. That evening, I stood by the porch door and watched the light begin to slant gold through the oak tree. The children were playing in the yard. My son and Jenna were inside, scrolling through their phones, half talking about dinner. No one saw me. No one asked where I'd been or what I was holding in my hands. That was all right, because this wasn't for them. Not yet. I looked at the camera in my palm, then at the light outside, and I made a decision. Tomorrow I would take a picture. Not of them, not for them, of me, for me. And maybe I'd frame it. Maybe I'd hang it in the living room, right beside their perfect canvas. Let them call it clutter. Let them pretend not to notice. But it would be there. Solid. Seen. Mine. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the trees when I set up the tripod. No announcement, no commotion. Just me, the camera, and the hush that always comes right before twilight, when the day exhales and the night hasn't yet gathered itself. I chose the porch, not because it was the most scenic, but because it was mine. This porch had seen it all. First steps, last goodbyes. Birthday candles, thunderstorms, casseroles cooling on the railing. Paul built the banister with his own hands, carving our initials into the sidepost one lazy afternoon, just because I asked him to. It was never meant to impress, but it always held me. I positioned the tripod under the old oak tree, the one whose roots ran so deep they buckled the sidewalk out front. The light was soft now, filtering through the branches in ribbons. It painted the floorboards in honey and made the dust in the air look like something holy. I checked the angle, adjusted the tilt, and then I stepped back inside. Not for drama, for the shawl, the one I wore every Christmas morning, every baby christening, every goodbye. Worn thin in places, the edges unraveled from years of catching on cabinet corners and garden fences. It was the kind of garment that remembered. I wrapped it around my shoulders and looked at myself in the hallway mirror. No makeup, no fresh curls, no effort to erase the years. Just me. 57 laugh lines, 3 age spots I could name, hair that used to be auburn and now caught silver like dew, a face not untouched by time, but undiminished. I walked back out to the porch, stood in front of the oak, and pressed the shutter. The red light blinked. 10 seconds. I took my place, one hand on the banister, the other resting at my side, fingers lightly brushing the fringe of the shawl. I didn't smile. Not right away. I breathed, let the light find me. And when the shutter clicked, I smiled with the fullness of a woman who had spent a lifetime looking out windows at pictures she wasn't in and decided not to wait for permission anymore. The camera whirred, and the Polaroid slid out with a soft thunk. I pulled it gently and held it by the edge, watching as the image developed. Slow, hazy at first, then clearer, sharper, like memory itself coming into focus. And there I was, framed in gold light, eyes soft but steady, wrapped in the shoal of 1,000 family moments. No poses, no edits, just presence, just proof. I stood there a long time, longer than I meant to. The air was cooling, the porch wood creaking under my weight. In the distance, I could hear the kids squealing over a game. Inside, the murmur of voices. Life moved on unaware. And I let it, because for once I wasn't chasing to keep up. I wasn't trying to be let in. I had made something of my own. Later, I printed the photo. I found an old frame from the hallway closet, the one I used to use for school portraits, back when each new grade came with a gap-toothed smile and a fresh pack of crayons. I cleaned the glass, careful not to smudge the corners, slid the image inside. The frame was a little worn, a small chip at the bottom. I liked that. It looked lived in, honest. I hung it in the living room, just beside the new family canvas. They'd positioned theirs carefully. Symmetrical, centered, visually balanced, Jenna had said. I placed mine beside it, not to compete, to belong, to exist. 2 images, one crafted, one captured, side by side, no labels, no captions. But if someone were to ask, I'd know what to say. They took a picture of a family. I captured a woman who made it. It happened on Sunday afternoon. The house was busy in that particular way it always is on departure day. Zippers zipping, plastic containers being matched with lids, someone yelling from upstairs about missing socks. The air smelled like the end of something. Leftovers, tired perfume, and a hint of dust rising as chairs scraped across the floor. I had just finished wiping down the counters. Not out of duty this time, just rhythm. My hands remembered, even when my heart no longer felt the obligation. Jenna swept through the kitchen, arms full of folded clothes, and offered a quick, "Thanks again for letting us take over the place. It was perfect." I nodded. She didn't notice. My son entered next, kissed my cheek, then started unplugging chargers from the wall. "You've got the best lighting in here," he said. "We got some great stuff." I smiled gently. "They turned out nice," I said. Not a question. Not quite a compliment either. He didn't reply. He was already asking the kids to grab their backpacks. No one looked at the wall. Not once. Not at their canvas. Not at mine. I walked them out to the car the way I always did. Watched as they packed the trunk, argued about headphones, adjusted the rearview mirror. I stood by the gate while they buckled seatbelts and said hasty goodbyes. Emma waved from the window. "Love you, Grandma." "I know," I said softly. And I did. I truly did. But love, real love, is more than the shape of a word. It's in how someone makes room for you. And they hadn't made room for me in a very long time. I stood there until the car turned the corner. Then the taillights blinked once, twice, and disappeared. And just like that, it was quiet again. Inside, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat in Paul's chair. The house sighed around me, grateful, perhaps, to return to itself. I looked across the room, The two photos still hung side by side. Mine, smaller, simpler, but unmissable. I studied it the way one studies a window, not a mirror. It didn't show me who I was. It reminded me what I refused to become. Not invisible, not softened into the background like old wallpaper, not waiting, not anymore. That evening, as the light dimmed, I performed a small ritual. I took down their photo, gently. No bitterness, just finality. I wrapped it in a clean dish towel, the soft, good kind I only use for bread dough and breakables, and slid it into the hallway closet behind the spare pillows. I didn't throw it away. I wasn't angry, just done. Next, I walked to the drawer where I kept the family albums, the real ones, thick with pages, plastic sleeves clouded at the corners. I flipped through the decades, stopping briefly at a picture of me holding my son at his christening, hair wind-blown, eyes half closed in the sun. He never asked for that photo, never framed it, but I remembered every detail. I tucked it under my arm, along with a few others, not many. Just the ones that had me in them. The ones that proved I had lived beside them, not behind them. And I brought them upstairs to my room, to my nightstand drawer, to a place no one else opened. Then came the final gesture. Small, intimate, unmistakable. I stood in the hallway and looked at the wall where their photo had been. The nail still waited, lonely. I didn't remove it. Instead, I reached into the sideboard and pulled out a key, the old skeleton key we used for the shed. I hung it on the nail. That was it. No explanation, no symbolism explained aloud. But I knew what it meant. That door is closed now. Not locked, just closed. If they want to open it, they'll need to come with intention. They'll need to notice, ask, choose. But I won't stand waiting at the threshold anymore. I walked back to the porch, pulled the shawl tighter around me, and sat as the wind picked up. The oak tree rustled above, and the light outside faded into something deeper than dusk. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like something was missing, because I had given enough, waited enough, bent enough, and now I had chosen myself. Not loudly, but completely. I wake earlier now, not from restlessness, not anymore, but from something else, a kind of still contentment, the way the earth might wake before sunrise, not to begin rushing, just to be ready. The house is quiet, mine again. The old floorboards creak their familiar rhythm as I walk the halls. The windows welcome the dawn in slow layers, gold, then rose, then the soft white of morning sun on old lace curtains. There's no noise, no bustle, just the breath of a life unfolding on its own time. And that's enough. In the kitchen, I place my blue-rimmed mug on the table. It's back in its spot now, not hidden in the back of a cabinet, not substituted or updated. Just waiting, as it always had. I fill it with fresh coffee, the kind I like, bold, unflavored, simple. No one else stirs. The only music is the clink of the spoon and the birds outside, already busy with their day. I sip slowly, and something settles in me. Not pride, not defiance, just clarity. The photo still hangs in the living room, mine, not tucked in a corner, not half hidden on a side table, centered, framed in quiet gold. Some part of me used to wonder if it would upset anyone, if someone would walk in and say, "Why is this here?" But now I understand. Their silence is not my concern. Their comfort is not my duty. I don't need their permission to be visible, and I don't need their notice to know I matter. I look around the room and see it as it truly is. Not a set, not a backdrop. A home, worn by love, marked by years, full of echoes, and mine, every pillow fluffed, every frame dusted, every shawl folded over a chair. None of it background, none of it invisible, all of it a life, made, lived, held, by me. Some days I imagine they'll notice. They'll come back and stop by the wall. Someone will glance up and pause just long enough to see it, really see it. And maybe they'll say, "That's Grandma." Not, "That's the woman who kept the house ready," or "the one who always knew where the light switches were," or "the one who stayed behind." But simply, "That's her," and maybe they won't. That's all right too. Because I know who I am in that photo. I know the strength in that stance, the softness in that smile, the entire history in those eyes. That's the woman who held the thread of this family long before anyone realized there was a pattern. And when they forgot her, she remembered herself. I water the plants. I write letters. I hum to the old radio while I chop vegetables no one else will eat. And each of these things, small, quiet, mine, feels like a return. Not to who I was before they left me out, but to the woman who never truly left. The wind moves outside. The tree stirs. A leaf drifts down onto the porch, lands gently on the railing where I once stood for the photo. I think of Paul, and I smile. He would have loved that picture. He always said, "You're most beautiful when you forget to doubt yourself." Well, I've forgotten now. And in forgetting their dismissals, I remembered the most important thing. Presence is not something granted. It's claimed, lived in, stood in, framed, not by others, but by the shape you make, just by refusing to disappear. So I leave it there. The photo, the shawl, the house. All of it still. All of it whole. And me? I am exactly where I need to be. Seen, perhaps, or perhaps not, but known by the only person who ever truly needed to see it. Myself. Fade to black. Soft voiceover, her own, steady and clear. They took a picture of a family. I captured a woman who made it.